This is your hillbilly historian from East Tennessee Hills, coming to you today to talk about a very, very touchy, controversial subject. But I believe in the truth, nothing but the truth. We used to believe in truth in this country. Remember, they used to say truth, justice, and the American way. But we've lost that element of truth in our society, especially our government. They tend to enjoy lying to the American people, especially this Biden crime family we've got in there now. But speaking of truth, one of the biggest hoaxes ever perpetrated upon the American people, and our government and its agencies love to tell humongous lies and to create hoaxes and tell them on the American people. It's a sad situation, and it's something the American people have to start demanding of their politicians. And we'll get there. We're getting there. We're doing a lot better. We've got a lot of heroes in government today who's not up there for the money, but they're up there to tell the truth. We've always had politicians that lie to the American people, but some of them perpetrate just a out-and-out hoax on the people. Now, because this is the Appalachian area, the hills of East Tennessee, one of the great hoaxes pulled on the American people was the Sergeant Alvin York story. Now, I got interested in this because my father attended church where Alvin York was the deacon down in Pall Mall. And one night they went out to have a cigarette, a smoke. The ministry of the church was hot, humid, so they went outside to relax and have a smoke. And my father, who was a young man, had not entered the service himself, asked Alvin York what happened on that ridge there toward the end of World War I. They call it the Great War. What happened on that ridge that day? And Alvin York told him, and my dad would never lie about this, Alvin York told him it never happened the way they told it. Now listen to that. It never happened the way they told it. Now, Alvin York had a squad of 8 men, and they all signed affidavits on what happened on that ridge that day, and not a one of them told the same story. Not a one. And then, in 1929, the University of Berlin did a study on what happened on that ridge that day. They interviewed the 127 Germans who were captured that day or were in the capacity of captured status, and not a one of them told it the way the U.S. government told it. Now, who was running the government? Woodrow Wilson, socialist, who gave us the 16th Amendment and income tax, which the government never really needed. The only reason for the 16th Amendment and the income tax is because the Supreme Court had ruled 3 times that it was unconstitutional. And that socialist, Abraham Lincoln, tried twice to have an income tax, and the Supreme Court threw it out both times. Republicans tried again, There's your socialist, your original socialist. And it was thrown out by the Supreme Court a third time. And so they got that amendment passed. Woodrow Wilson and his Secretary of State was Cordell Hull. Now, Cordell Hull was an out-and-out Marxist. And he's got buildings named after him in Nashville, Tennessee, because we love our communists and we love our Marxists for some reason in this country. We love them, even though they're trying to tear down the American way, truth, justice, and the American way. We love them. Can't figure that one out, but maybe someday we'll get them out of the way. But Cordell Hull got us into 2 world wars. He was Secretary of State when we entered the Great War against Germany. And he was also Secretary of State under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who loved his Marxists as well. Cordell Hull got us into World War II. You know, if it hadn't been for some of the stunts him and FDR were pulling, Japan would not have had to attack Pearl Harbor and get us into World War II. But the Marxists wanted us into World War II, and Cordell Hull helped them do that. But Cordell Hull also gave us, when they passed that 16th Amendment for income tax, instead of having a fair tax or an equal tax or a percent tax for everybody to pay the exact same, he gave us Karl Marx and Frederick Engels' graduated income tax system, which penalizes the hardest workers, and the more successful people are penalized the most under Marxism, under communism, and that's what Cordell Hull gave us. They also gave us the story of Sergeant Alvin York. They made a hero out of Sergeant Alvin York because it was getting toward the end of the war, and the United States didn't have a hero, and they needed to sell war bonds, and you got to have heroes to sell war bonds. You know, in World War II, every time somebody got a Medal of Honor, if he was still alive, they'd bring him back to the States and sell war bonds. And Alvin York, they needed a hero to sell war bonds. Because even though they had passed the Federal Reserve and the Income Tax Amendment back in 1916, they still had to pay their bills. They hadn't learned how to just print money like they do today. You know, print money and spend it and call it debt. Hey, but back then they were still trying to actually pay their bills. The United States didn't have a hero from the war, so they had to create one. And they put out the word, and the Alvin York story was born. Now, I do not fault Alvin York. He came out smelling like a rose. He didn't even get an injury out of this or anything. He was given 400 acres, which now I think is a state park, and a 2-story brick home, which is part of that state park now, celebrating the heroism of Alvin York. Now, historians like around Cookeville or UT at Knoxville, I've tried to approach historians on the subject, the truth of Alvin York, but no, they run like the cowards they are. They don't want to talk about the truth of the Alvin York story. Now, this story was perpetrated to sell war bonds, and Alvin York benefited greatly. And when that study was done in Berlin, none of them agreed. Not a single member of Alvin York's squad told it like it was. Now, there's a historian at University of Oklahoma who's published a book claiming that Alvin York and his entire squad is the one that performed the heroic deeds. But then FDR talked Hollywood into making a movie in 1940 because he was trying to fan the flames. And I'd say Cordell Hull probably had something to do with this as well. They made a movie to fan the flames and get war fever so that we would fight the Germans in World War II, fight them again. Now, take that movie. Oh, and there's people that swear up and down that movie's true. And it is nowhere near the truth. Alvin York, supposedly, all but his little lonesome, according to this movie. Now, the historian at the University of Oklahoma disagrees. He says it was his entire squad that performed the deeds that day, and in those affidavits that those squad members signed, when they filled out those affidavits, they basically said there was another man who actually did more than Alvin that day. But that's for historians to figure out, and the guy at the University of Oklahoma has done a pretty good job. But that movie had Alvin York going up there all but his lonesome with a pistol. That was a 1911 Colt pistol. The magazine carried 8 rounds. If you had one in the chamber and then you inserted a magazine with 8 rounds, you had 9 rounds. And a rifle with a 5-round clip. And he knocked out 30 machine gun nests, killed 30 Germans, maybe more, and captured all but his lonesome 127 4-year veteran fighting men. Men who had been in the worst warfare in the history of mankind. They were veterans, they knew what they were doing, and this hillbilly from Pall Mall, Tennessee, went up on that hill and gobbled like a turkey. And I'm not even sure they have wild turkeys in Europe. And he goes up there and gobbles, and one of them sticks up his head and he shoots him. He gobbles again, another one sticks up his head and he shoots him. He gobbles again. You know, now, let me tell you something. I've known a few Germans. They didn't just fall off the back of the turnip truck. You might get away with gobbling one time, but you ain't going to get away with it 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 times. That crap would not have ever happened. And there ain't no way one man knocked out 30 machine gun nests. And you know, they have anywhere from 2 to 5 people in them machine gun nests. And they ain't stupid. They were veterans, 4-year veterans. And this rookie from Pall Mall, Tennessee, went up there, knocked out 30 machine gun nests, killed over 30 Germans, and captured 127 all by his little lonesome. That dog don't hunt. Not even in Pall Mall, Tennessee, that dog don't hunt. But anyway, my version of the story is that Alvin York and his squad was in charge of a prisoner holding area. And you can check with the University of Berlin, see how that study went. and they, I think, will pretty much confirm what I'm talking about. They were, and it was getting toward dark, and they decided to come back uh, to headquarters of their division with these 127 prisoners. And a prisoner holding area is where, when they capture 3 or 4 over here, they capture 20 over here, they bring them back, and they have a squad guard them, stand around them armed and guard them. But it was getting toward dark, and they had to bring them home. And as they were marching them back to headquarters, the word got out that the United States needed a hero. Cordell Hull, Secretary of State, told the Secretary of War that we needed a hero. They put out the word to the officers, find us a hero. And when Alvin York and his squad was bringing them prisoners back, an officer looked out and said, "Look, we've got our hero right here. We'll say he captured all them all by himself, and we'll make him the most decorated soldier, and they'll have somebody that can go home and sell war bonds." There you go. Truth from the hills of East Tennessee, the Appalachian Mountains, from the hillbilly historian. Now, I know there's people out there going to scream their heads off and call me every name in the book, but I got backbone and I've got kahunas, and I'll stand by my story, and you stand by yours. And if you want to have a public debate, we'll have it. This is your hillbilly historian signing off.